Yes, everyone, and welcome to the IrishHotspur podcast, joined by David this time. Last time out was with Sean Butler. He and I had a good conversation. If you did enjoy that one, feel free to check it out because sometimes with these podcasts, we talk about what, maybe has been happening recently with Spurs, but really it's just a kind of place for us to sort of vent, a place for us to get a bit of therapy, kind of talk about the things that sort of maybe we don't get the chance to on the shows, or just maybe some sort of topics that maybe you might think are a bit niche, or things that we just are kind of have in our mind, conversations that we would probably normally have on the phone or, via WhatsApp or whatever it is. It's sort of kind of the whole purpose of this podcast. So if you do enjoy it, feel free to smash that like button and leave your comments down below on what we have to talk. But Dave, kind of before we get into it, how are you? And it's good to have you back.
Yeah, I'm absolutely buzzing. Look, last round of the last 16 of the Champions League, sitting third in the Premier League. It's exciting times ahead, Jack, especially once the World Cup is finished. So it's all pedal to the metal, as they say over here.
Pedal to the metal, definitely, and big times ahead. Only so many games left before we have that intermission with the World Cup. So definitely lots of things to be thinking about Spurs wise. But might as well just kind of get straight into it. I think a bit of Spurs news. Of course, everybody, we are into the round of 16. We are into the Champions League, but there may be some kind of various Spurs news that maybe I kind of want to talk about today. It's a bit of a Jack podcast, if anything. So if you're not happy with the topics, if you're not happy with what we're talking about, feel free to blame it on me here. Don't blame it on Davo. Hill Messi loan is what we're going to discuss first here. I think Tottenham Tears tweeted today, Dave, that they are looking at options. I think it was via an Ali Gold sort of maybe message. Maybe a video came out from him. I haven't been able to check it out yet, but looks like the case that Hill Messi is expected to head out on loan this January, and has kind of been given, a range of options of his choosing to go for. I'm a bit saddened by it, but it's kind of mixed feelings about it because Conte doesn't really exactly trust him yet, and I think we just have to sort of understand that as much as we are the caretakers and the holders of the prophecy of Hill Messi. I think we also have to understand maybe where Conte is coming from on this one, and he just doesn't seem to maybe trust him yet to be able to be that sort of, you could say, alternative to Kulusevski in that 3-4-3 in case Kulusevski isn't available. He just doesn't seem to trust him yet, which I think is totally fine. But Conte, while maybe not trusting him fully to be able to take that role on, maybe in the way that we would like, he has had actually a lot of really nice things to say about Hill Messi, you could say, Dave. He clearly sees the talent. He clearly sees that he's a good footballer. And then on top of that as well, he gave him some minutes and he did give him some chances. And I thought Hill Messi absolutely took them. And to be fair, a lot of people all of a sudden were actually asking for this guy to come on and asking for this guy to be given a chance. And he wasn't really maybe given much of a chance in that Bournemouth game or anything like that. But it was nice to see that, this season, Hill Messi has sort of kind of maybe turned a few heads and has sort of proved, or not proved, but shown a bit of that potential that perhaps Paratici originally saw, and why he originally brought him to this club. And even Conte, despite not fully trusting him yet, has even had really nice things to say about Hill Messi. So while he may be going on loan likely this January, and we are going to bring in someone different, I think this, project, Dave, this prophecy with Spurs and Hill Messi, it's not over.
Yeah, Gil Messi. Look, for me, Jack, it's I'm not happy that he's going out on loan, but I understand it. First of all, I think we'll all agree, and I think most fans have woken up to it, that there is a supreme amount of talent in the guy. It's absolutely the world is his oyster, I would say, to be honest with you. He can go as far as he wants as long as he dedicates himself to the game, makes the improvements he needs to do, which is maybe bulking up a little, learn to handle himself against maybe a bigger man. I think he'll be absolutely fine. But look, despite me believing he should get minutes, especially ahead of Lucas Moura, I haven't been impressed with him since he's come back for injury. It's clear to see that Lucas Moura has just finished out his contract at Tottenham and heading back to Brazil. And I believe Gil Messi should be getting minutes over him. I just think he adds a bit more calmness and composure to our attack when I've seen the guy play. But unfortunately, Conte just doesn't trust him yet. He just doesn't feel he's ready. Look, I'm going to trust Conte's judgment on it. And what I will say, Jack, rather than just have him sitting around here when we know clearly he's good enough, I mean, I'd much rather him go out and get the minutes that he needs up until the summer and then hopefully come back here. Lucas, I reckon, probably be shifted on. And then he can come back in here in the summer and take his place, because with the injuries to Richarlison, with the injuries to Kulu, Lucas Moura coming back, even though Gil Messi has been fit and Lucas Moura is coming back, Conte's opted to go for a 3-5-2. And then when Lucas Moura has got fit, he's gone with the 3-4-3, and Lucas Moura still hasn't produced, and Gil is finding it hard to get minutes. So there's no point in just wasting these talents. Let him go out and develop. Let him go out and learn maybe the bits and pieces that he needs to pick up. Learn to handle maybe in a tough environment where people are going to kick him week in, week out, and he has to get used to it. Learn how to play and learn how to deal with it. So for me, I think I'm not happy with it. I would much rather keep him around. I think rather than persisting with the same thing and getting the same results, I'd rather go with someone like Gil, a bit of freshness, bit of excitement, someone who offers similar to what Kulu offers, in my opinion, than any other player in the team. And what Kulu offers is what we're missing. You could see that in the games that he's come on, where he's playing on the right-hand side, cutting in, playing them delicious balls in off his left. But for some reason, Conte's not giving the minutes, so it will benefit him from going out on loan, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it will benefit him. If you were to have a choice of clubs, Dave, what would it be? For me, I think we all, of course, want him to go to another Premier League club and stay in England and, be more accustomed to the league. I sort of hesitate about him going to the Championship because I'm really not sure about how the I understand the physicality will be good for him and staying in England will be good for him. And that's obviously what the Championship would offer. I just kind of hesitate with the quality of opposition because I think when he does come up against those sort of defenders, even though he could be pushed around, I do think he'll also embarrass them quite often. And I think he'll find it quite easy coming up against some of those defenders at times in the Championship, especially if he were to go to, let's say, maybe even a Burnley right now. And funny enough, a team actually playing some pretty progressive football at the moment, right, over in the Championship and are looking quite good. If he were to go to a team like that, I actually hesitate to think he would really learn a whole lot there because I do feel like the quality of opposition isn't very high and he just kind of find it quite easy for the most part. I know people really don't want him to go to Spain and these sort of countries where they think, the opposition isn't as good either, but I sort of feel like I kind of wanted him originally to go if they were going to loan him and bring in an alternative for him. I kind of did want him to go to that Marseille team, Dave, because I think he would have gotten minutes. He would have probably have, he wouldn't have played against Spurs, but he would have played against Sporting. He would have played against Frankfurt in those Champions League nights. He would have played for that team. And I think I'm a bit disappointed that he actually didn't make that loan move because I actually think that would have been a good experience for him because it's a very good Marseille team in Ligue 1 at least. Like they are high in their table. They're doing quite well in the moment. He would have gotten a lot of minutes and would have gotten Champions League minutes, which I think is good for him at the end of the day. So what I kind of want for him is to be loaned to a team where he's going to be obviously played consistently, but then also I think be used in sort of a team that actually also has other least, let's say, decent players around him. Because I think the problem is that if you loan him to, let's say, like an Ibar or something like that, or something where he's just going to carry the team, I don't really know how much he's going to learn from that. I think it's good if you put him in a team that are still have other good players around him, but he still plays regularly. I'm not really thinking of a club at the top of my head right now where that could happen. Perhaps actually put him maybe to Udinese for like half a season because they are doing very well at Serie A right now. They certainly would play him. He gets to play alongside Udogie, Dave. But if you had a choice of club, maybe just to finish this Hill Messi conversation here, as much as it pains me to finish, I would love to talk about it for an hour. What sort of, where would you want to see him go?
Do you know, for me, I think you've got to analyze the areas in the player that you want to improve. And it's clear to see that it's physicality. So for me, it would make sense to throw him out somewhere where he's going to be kicked about every single week. And weirdly enough, when you come up against that, because I've been there, I wasn't the biggest guy growing up, and then you come up against guys that are bigger and stronger than you, and you learn so quickly. Instead of trying to knock the ball by them and then running alongside you and just knocking it off because they're stronger, you've got to learn to cope with it. You've got to learn different moves to be able to get by them. And weirdly enough, I think if you threw him in where somewhere it's really physical and he's getting kicked and ragdolled about every single week, it will actually improve him a lot more technically as well, because his first touch always has to be spot on. He has to learn different skill moves, different tricks to be able to play around players, maybe try different linking up with people and stuff like that. So for me, it comes down to, and like you said, the main thing is he's got to play week in, week out. But for me, technically wise, he's absolutely sound. So you've got to identify his weaknesses and put him out somewhere where it's going to test them weaknesses. And then that's where you see the true measure of the player. How does he stand up? Does he wilt to it
Mm.
and cave every week? Or does he stand up and deal with it and learn something different? And I think that's what you're going to do with Gil.
I don't think he should go to La Liga again. I think that's way too familiar for him.
Yeah.
I'd rather he actually go to the championship than even La Liga. That's how low I rate La Liga for him to go out there. I just don't think that helps him
Mhm.
whatsoever. I'd be okay with Serie A, actually. I really would, especially if he did go to a team where he played week in, week out. Ultimately, he's coming up against good defenders over there, very high quality defenders, I think, in the
Mhm.
Serie A. Uh, and it's a bit more tactical, but it's not as physical, I would say, in certain degrees. Bundesliga, I'm not so sure because I think a lot of attackers just do well there because it's so open ended and there's so much space behind those back lines. I think he would have a lot of fun in the Bundesliga, Bryan Gil, because he gets to press all the time. He gets to try to win the ball back
Mhm.
high up the pitch and whatnot. But I don't really know how much he learns from that.
Throw
So
him up to Rangers or Scotland. They'll get kicked
that's
every,
an
or
interesting
Rangers or
one. But then
Celtic.
he's also playing around other high quality players. So that is like an interesting one. That'd be an
And he'll get
interesting.
kicked around every single week. For me, there's no point of the true where you'll find the true measure of a player and where his character once you
Okay.
kind of get that, you can judge where his career is going to go. Because if he wilts, he may get a few decent moves here and there because he's
Mm,
going through some purple patches, but ultimately he'll never make it a top level. But if he comes
yeah.
out of it with it as an improved player. He's learned how to deal with it, and you've thrown him outside his comfort zone, and he's dealt with it. You see the true measure of the player, and it just goes. He will always come to a club like Tottenham then and
Right.
succeed. So for me, I'm looking at Celtic Rangers. I think the two of them would be absolutely perfect for him. He gets to play with some high caliber players in that league, but he will also get kicked around every single week, and it's physical. I think that'd be ideal for Gil.
That's an interesting shout. We'll leave it at that. I like
I'd
that
like to
one.
see him in Postecoglou's setup at Celtic, the way he plays.
He could go to Rangers though. Like, even though you probably rather see him at Celtic because I know you
Yeah,
like Celtic, but at Rangers they're not doing so well, right? Under Van Bronckhorst, if they haven't
yeah, he's
fired
not
him
doing great.
already, I think they might fire him soon. So he would go there and maybe play week in, week out and try to like sort of rescue them. Kind of like what he did at Valencia. Like Valencia weren't doing so well last season. Went to that team, sort of played week in, week out, and was kind of, their saving grace for a little bit, you could say.
Mm.
So maybe he could do that at Rangers. But let's talk about quickly Davinson Sanchez. And this is sort of like an observation I made the other day, Dave. When you look at the fact that in that game against Marseille, Romero is out, usually the right-sided center back then would be Davinson Sanchez as the preferred choice, just because he's waiting for this opportunity like he always has. This is sort of his role. This is his chance always. This is kind of his role in the squad, to you could say, to be Romero's backup when Romero isn't available. Conte has decided to go with an experiment of Longley and Eric Dyer instead, and basically just leaving Davinson Sanchez out altogether. That sort of suggests to me, especially with the recent performances, which we don't need to really dwell into because we all
Yeah.
know they've been shocking from Sanchez, the recent ones. But that sort of maybe suggests the end of Sanchez. Because if he's not being used in these games, and if he's even being also pulled off at halftime or pulled off in games, it's now been twice. It's not even against Bournemouth, he was taken off, Dave. And then what was it against Newcastle, maybe? I believe as well.
I'm not sure. There's been so many games.
It's
You have
so
to
hard, Dave. But there's another game recently where he was also pulled off, like after a pretty dreadful performance, if I recall as well. Maybe it was a European night. Might have been a European night against Sporting. He might have been pulled off too. But it sort of just then suggests maybe Conte's lost sort of all faith in Davinson Sanchez. And one thing I would add is that under Sanchez, he's been sort of that one player that I think Conte hasn't really improved at all. And I don't think that says anything about Conte. I think that says a lot about Sanchez because Conte was able to get a huge churn out of Ben Davies, was able to sort of resurrect his Spurs career, resurrect Eric Dyer's Spurs career, has brought good performances out of Matt Doherty when he was hopeless under Jose. He's made players look probably a lot better than they really actually are. And I think one thing that we could credit Conte with is his ability to sort of work with what he's got compared to the Pep Guardiolas of the world who need, an entire nation's GDP for a starting
Yeah.
11, in order to make their system work. Conte can make it work with Emerson. He can make it work with Dyer. He can make it work with Ben Davies. Sure, it's not pretty. Sure, it's not gorgeous. But I mean, how could it be? Ultimately, they're not great players. And Conte doesn't really, let's say, turn his nose up at it too much as other managers might. And he does get down and dirty, and he tries to figure out how he can get the best out of these players, what he can squeeze out of them consistently in order to make his system or his team work. Sanchez feels like the outlier. Sanchez feels like the one guy that has not improved under Conte. And I think Conte has probably come to terms with that now after a year. And so, Dave, I think it's over for Davinson Sanchez. And I actually hope he maybe gets moved on this January window, because he was given his chance this season, given lots of chances this season to impress, to come good, to maybe show that improvement that other players have under Conte. And I don't think he has. And it was a bit of concern, I think, when we asked even the We Are Tom TV boys. Like I said to them, has Dyer improved under Conte? They said yes. Has Davies improved? They said yes. And I said, has Sanchez improved? And they said, no, not really. And it's like, well, that's a bit of a concern. But I don't know, Dave, do you agree with my sort of, putting two and two together here, that I think he probably should be moved on, and maybe even Conte has actually given up on him?
Should have been moved on 3 years ago, in my opinion.
Look,
it's clear to see Conte's given up on him. The fact that he came in, he had Dyer, Romero, Davies, and Sanchez and Tanganga to pick from, and he's persisted with Dyer and Davies no matter the mistakes they've made, and has only had to use Sanchez because of Romero's injury. So look, he doesn't want him here. He knows he's a donkey. We all see he can keep clean sheets against relegation candidates where teams don't have an attack.
He hasn't been able to do that anymore. Yeah.
Anything above that, he just cannot do. He's just not good enough. Look, we got into a period here where teams were so bad, you were looking for any sort of good in a player. And we've got into the mindset of, oh, but he does a job. He comes in, he's happy to be back up. But that's the problem. What we need is players coming in here challenging for their position, wanting to fight for their position, not being happy when they're not starting football games. That's what I want, because that culture breeds success. That culture breeds winning. Winning breeds success. So that's the culture I want at this football club. Not a donkey that comes in against Nottingham Forest, against Wolves, 10-man Arsenal, has an easy ride, gets his stats fluffed up. I just don't understand the backing this guy gets. Bournemouth summed it up for me. That's exactly the Sanchez I know. So for me, after that performance was absolutely disgraceful. Should never get to play in the Spurs jersey again. And I'm glad Conte has woken up to him. Look, Jose knew about him. He was back up there. Poch knew he wasn't good enough. Nuno knew he wasn't good enough. Now Conte's here. Hopefully we face up to the realities. He's not good enough. Get rid and bring someone in here that actually wants to challenge Romero for his position.
I actually hope Levy spends the exact amount that he spent on Sanchez originally, just to see if we can get a whole better player instead. Because that's the sad thing as well, is that Sanchez was our most expensive ever defender before Romero came in. It's simple as. And we brought in Jan, we brought in Toby, we brought in Jan, we brought in Toby. Absolute, just beautiful, beautiful center backs, beautiful defenders. And Sanchez actually cost 3 times, if not double sometimes, I think, what their price was, I think, for Spurs. So it's just says a lot. It was a huge blow for us. And he's been here a while. I think ultimately he wasn't a bad influence in the squad or anything. He just, like a lot of players over that Hitchin time period, just weren't good enough. Just aren't good enough.
You know what it is, though,
We've just outgrown them. We've just outgrown them, and they're not good enough anymore. And so, Dave, I know what you're about to say. I want you to say it, but also just to steer it as well. Is it possible to move him on in January? Basically, what I'm going to ask as well. Pratici has found it hard to move on some players from that Hitchin era that we brought in, because they are tough sells. They're tough sells. Can he loan out a Sanchez? Can he move on to Sanchez in January? But also say what you were about to say.
Yeah, look, for me, I think, at all costs, just get rid of the guy. There's no point having a guy here that's just as clumsy as he is.
And especially if you didn't trust him last night. Didn't trust him last night. Was hauled off against Bournemouth for not making any tackles. I think he made 1 interception, 0 blocks. I mean, this is your centre half you're talking about. It's absolutely shocking. I think actually you're right. I think it was Newcastle he was hauled off because his passing was absolutely all over the place. For me, look, I don't care whether it's January. It'll probably more than likely be the summer.
but just get him done. He's not good enough to be here. Like I said, bring in someone that wants to challenge someone for their position. It's the only way we're going to get to where we want to go to at Tottenham Hotspur, which is lifting trophies. But to sum up Davinson Sanchez, and maybe we'll move on to the next talking point, is we know Jose Mourinho, most offensive manager in the world. Now, when he
knows
goes
a good center
forward,
back when he sees one. Jose.
yeah, first of all, he knows a good centre back when he sees one. But when he goes forward, because his teams are set up defensively, he pinpoints the weakness in the back line to be able to go and win the game. Now, with Man United, when they played Ajax in the final of the Europa League, guess who he pinpointed? And he told Sanchez this when he walked into the football club. He pinpointed Sanchez. He told United players, put the ball in behind them, playing around them. You're going to get joy. You will get joy off them. And ultimately, they ended up going on and beating Ajax. And I think actually the goal came in from behind him. So for me, look, you've got a manager who you would like to think knows good centre backs, and then he pinpoints one to go and win a cup final.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's being pinpointed to win, to play in and behind and in around to go and win a cup final, it just goes to show where we want to go. And when we do get to these cup finals, he can never ever play. So don't just get rid of him.
I think his worst ever moment in his Spurs shirt was the Enes Mirror game on Thanksgiving. It was a Thanksgiving day. It was Thanksgiving day for me, Dave. I remember taking the day off. You were doing the watch along with Marcelo. And he got beat 2 times by the same farmer for Enes Mirror. And I think that was really the end of Sanchez. But we're going to move on from it. So, yeah, everybody, just keep that in mind. I think maybe Conte has actually lost his faith. It's not, we, of course, have lost our faith in him, but it looks like Conte actually maybe has as well. 3-5-2 work in progress, sort of kind of a short topic here as well, Dave, before we get into some juicy ones. But the 3-5-2, I just feel like we're probably missing a few things in it, and it's why it hasn't worked. I don't want people to just immediately jump on it and say it doesn't work, because I think it can work. It's just we don't obviously have the right personnel, I think, to make it work. And also, actually, certain players in particular haven't maybe stepped up this season enough to make it work either. So I'll kind of break this down. I think we already know, and we don't have to get deep into it, the center backs have been very poor this season in possession, which already hurts us, and that doesn't make the 3-5-2 as effective. Another thing as well, though, is that we do have sort of 3 defensively minded midfielders. As much as we love Højbjerg and Bentancur, they are a bit more defensively minded. They've actually done an exceptional job, though, and we will talk about it later going forward. And they've, added an element to their game that maybe wasn't there before with going forward. But I feel like Bissouma and Skip have kind of shown to be a bit uncomfortable, perhaps, like kind of going into that final third. Bissouma's even being used as like the deepest of the midfielders anyway. Some people think he should be played higher up, like kind of where Hojbjerg is. I think that's hard to say because of how well Hojbjerg is playing. And I don't know if Bissouma would have finished that goal last night in the manner that Hojbjerg did. So while I appreciate that argument to get better out of Bissouma, the way Bentancur and Hojbjerg are playing, I don't really know if you can move them out of like their position right now in that 3-5-2. Skippy, when played against Bournemouth, looked really uncomfortable going in those final third areas. If anything, I think what we learned from that is he's definitely much more comfortable defending his goal than he is actually trying to attack the opposition goal. And I think he is probably better off actually playing as a deeper role, perhaps even playing that Bissouma role. If anything, maybe he and Bissouma kind of battle it out for that one, and Bissouma can try to take up the Bentancur Højbjerg role if needed. The other thing I want to add as well is the wingbacks. I think, of course, Perisic has brought a lot of assists to this team, but in order for that 3-5-2 to work, I think we really need one dynamic attacking wingback that's a real threat, is basically like another sort of attacker, to another forward, helping us out. And Perisic hasn't exactly been that for us this season. He's been a bit inconsistent, a bit raw at times, not exactly adjusting to the Premier League perfectly. Sessegnon, kind of the same thing, a bit clumsy, a bit sort of kind of clunky at times even as well, kind of going forward. Emerson, people accuse him of the same thing as well, which is definitely true. Doherty, I think that's also true. And then Jed Spence just has never given a go. So we don't really ever see any real dynamic wingbacks in the 3-5-2. And I think the 3-5-2 has certainly helped out and made look a lot better if you really did have some dynamic attacking wingbacks. The disappointment is that the right wing back position, we all know was going to be a bit of a weakness going into the season, but it feels like the left wing back spot hasn't stepped up in the manner that they thought they would this season. So the 3-5-2, I don't think for me, Dave, has worked for that reason. And then just finally, I think, kind of the poor form and kind of inconsistency of Sonny has also not helped out the 3-5-2 too much either. So I don't know, Dave, kind of 3 or 4 different things I pointed out with the 3-5-2 and maybe why it doesn't work. Maybe the last thing I would add is that we obviously don't have that creative midfielder that everybody wants to, kind of address as well. We don't have a Nico Barella. We don't have a James Madison or Weston McKennie, who's more of a box-to-box midfielder to help out with the goals either. So there are a lot of things I think that haven't made the 3-5-2 work. And so I don't want to give up on it, but I think those are a lot of the problems that I highlighted about it. And I'm not sure which one highlights for you the most, but just shows that the 3-5-2 is very much work in progress.
I think, look, a 3-5-2 works, but not at Tottenham Hotspur. You
Not at the
look you
moment.
look at
Yeah.
you look at the players Conte had to choose from at Inter compared to the players he's got to choose at Tottenham. It's night and day. He's got players in the Inter team that were comfortable on the ball right throughout the team, could progress the ball, could take it under pressure, could play. Also had a bit of pizzazz about them where if needed, if the pass wasn't on, they could take their man on.
Mm,
We just don't have that at Tottenham. Um, and look, it doesn't work for me at Tottenham on a numerous of things. I think first of all, you're spot on about the wing backs. It's just they can't get up the field quick enough in that position,
they're
and they're
not
just not
threatening
good enough
enough.
on the
Yeah.
ball
Yeah.
going forward. They don't have that pace. You need electric pace. Perisic, he's decent, but he's not quick enough. And then you've got Emerson, who's probably quick enough, but not technical enough.
Yeah,
So it's kind
exactly.
of like it just doesn't work with the wing backs. Look, the centre backs, they've got to be on it every single time the ball comes into them. We don't have that. 1 minute they're brilliant, the next minute it's being ballooned out into the stands. The midfielders, they're all, like you said, defensively minded, although Bentancur and Højbjerg have improved. That's because in a 2, they have to get forward. They have no option but to get forward. But in a 3-5-2, it's kind of like they all leave it to each other and they don't break forward enough to support Son and Kane. And I think Son and Kane are largely isolated in
I agree.
the 3-5-2, where the ball's being pumped up to them. Usually it's a long ball, way too high for any of them to get down and control. The opposition are taking the ball off us, recycling it, and building their next attack. And it just doesn't suit Kane and Son.
Yeah.
Son's better coming in from the left-hand side or having space to run into. Kane's better dropping in, taking that ball where he has space to turn, finding Sonny. And when he has another option running down the right-hand side. So for me,
Right.
I think we've got to stick with the 3-4-3. It's what suits our players more. And plus in the 3-4-3, it encourages us to get forward a lot more. Whereas with the squad of players we have, because a lot of them are defensively minded, and whether that's true mentality, whether that's true attitude, whether that's just their natural game. A lot of them are end up being defensively minded in the game. And it's kind of like a 3-5-2 for me. And I've seen this a number of times, bar maybe the Leicester game or maybe the Everton game, where kind of it just encourages us to sit deeper and deeper and deeper,
Yeah.
which we don't need that encouragement in the first place. So for me,
Mm.
on all of them bases, it just doesn't work. Scrap it and go with the 3-4-3 till we get the right players in here to be able to play a 3-5-2 if that's what Conte wants to go forward.
Can't add any more to that, Dave. That's kind of just our quick thoughts on the 3-5-2. I think I kind of voiced my sort of, reasons why it just isn't working for us. And I think Dave pointed out something very important there where it's like, it's not like the 3-5-2 doesn't work. It just doesn't work for the moment at Spurs. And I think we just have to be patient. Some additions in the transfer window will definitely help and make it definitely function a bit more. But there are, I think, a variety of reasons. It's not just one reason. I think why it doesn't work. There are a few different systemic sort of kind of problems, I think, with why it just isn't working for Conte right now. But with how few forwards we have to choose from because of injuries, he kind of has to persist with it. So I sort of kind of feel bad for him actually for some reason.
Well, he could utilize Perisic up in the forward areas, get Sessa on left wing back, and bring Emerson back in at right wing back. Like there are little things he can do for the time being. I'm just not sure whether he's going to do them, to be honest.
Yeah, you're probably right, Dave. Probably right. Another one I kind of want to bring up here is probably one of my favorite things, King Hoddle. Hope you're listening. Emerson agenda, hashtag save Emerson. Kind of some new updates on this one, Dave, of course, because I've, brought this up before on, the podcast, since this is my therapy session. This is my sort of talk with with the shrink, you could say. And Dave is my shrink for this one. He gets to just listen to my sort of vent. So if you don't appreciate it, welcome to fast forward to the next topic. But Emerson, Dave, kind of some updates that I've noticed on sort of the agenda against him is that fans before that Marseille game last night, I believe on the tube, were singing Emerson can't attack, he can't defend, he's our right wing back. I've sort of have, and also recently, I must say as well, I've seen lots of calls after Twitter, as well as some people on fan shows, even some of these interviews and things we've done, say they never want to see him in a Spurs shirt again.
They
They've
were
gone as
applauding
far
when he
to,
was taken off against Bournemouth as well.
they were what?
Applauding when he got took off against Bournemouth as well.
I just, and as well, actually, I think some people said that was the worst cameo they'd ever seen in the Bournemouth game. So those things in mind, worst cameo they've ever seen against Bournemouth. Emerson, they have already a song about him that, is already making fun of him and sort of bullying him, I think, in some manner. And then as well, there have been people that have said they've never wanted to see him in a Spurs shirt again. I think they're welcome to all have that opinion, Dave. I just think I wish it were a bit more consistent with players that we had in the past. That's where I think I stand up for Emerson. And that is the reason why I stand up for Emerson, is because I wish that were more consistent. I think if you want to be that harsh, if you want to be, just that, if you want to hold those sort of standards of players, fully welcome to. I'm not going to hold you against that. But I wish then it was a bit more consistent, because I think there have been players that have actually done a whole lot worse for this club than Emerson ever has. And especially with how short he's been here, I really am shocked how much of an agenda there already is against him with how short of a time he's really been at this football club to begin with. But let's bring up 3 players that I wrote down here, Dave. Harry Winks. Harry Winks, of course, we had a huge, let's be honest, we didn't like the guy. But Harry Winks, I think, had more of a fan club than I think Emerson does. Like when
First of
we,
all,
when we attacked, yeah,
it's not. I didn't like the guy. No problem with him as a human being.
sure, yeah,
It's
yeah.
just he wasn't good enough as a footballer.
Exactly. Well, there's maybe a good point that you just actually didn't think about, Dave. It feels like Emerson is actually attacked as a human being and actually is attacked as a footballer. I don't really think with Harry Winks ever really attacked that much as a human being or anything. I feel like Emerson is attacked as a footballer and actually as a human being at times. There are people even going as far to criticize him for advertising the game he was going to play in. I just don't really understand. Like, it's gone to levels that I just don't really fathom. And another thing I would mention, Dave, is that Winks ultimately had backers. He had people that liked him. He had people that stood up for him. There were people that wanted him to play as a cam. There were people that wanted him to play as a number 10. There are people that said the way he was brought up in the youth academy showed that he's one of the most talented players ever brought through Spurs, etc. There were a lot of quotes, except, things that I can bring up that suggest that there were a lot of people that backed Winks and stood up for Winks, regardless of what we maybe said against him or whatever. There was a strong, I think, fan base that enjoyed Winks and liked Winks and definitely stood up for the guy when maybe they felt like there was some criticism thrown against him. I'll even take it further, where when the team was playing quite poor and Winks was playing in the team, lots of Winks fans were sooner to put down Hojbjerg than they were ever to put down Winks. They actually claimed to say that Hojbjerg was really the one holding Winks back instead of Winks holding Hojbjerg back. These sort of excuses, Dave, I think are fine for a player if you really like the player. My issue is that I don't think there's anybody really apart from King Hoddle and myself that seemed to defend Emerson in a similar manner to how people defended Winks. And what I don't understand is I find Emerson to be a much better footballer actually than Winks. And that really isn't saying much because I don't think either are really that great of footballers. But Emerson, I think, has done more in the games that he has played, especially after last night and especially in that Newcastle game where I remember as well, people put him down in the Newcastle game where he was simply one of the best players on the pitch that day when everybody else didn't show up, when everybody else was making individual mistakes. I thought he was actually quite decent and was actually shining light sort of on the day actually as a wing back. And so, Dave, another player I want to bring up is actually Aurier. And it really, connects here. When people have said about Emerson, I never want to see him in a Spurs shirt again. I have heard that more times said about Emerson than I ever had about Serge Aurier. Serge Aurier literally walked out on us at halftime, threw the Spurs shirt on the ground, basically disrespected this entire club. And more people I've heard say they've never wanted to see Emerson in a Spurs shirt
Mm.
ever again than they ever did with Serge Aurier. I don't understand that either. Last player I'll mention here as well that has disrespected this club in multiple ways, and also a player that I even have stood up for in the past, and probably foolishly, in Ndombele, Dave. Another player that basically disrespected this football club in multiple ways and showed us as fans absolutely no respect whatsoever and no heart whatsoever. I know fewer people have said, I don't want to see Ndombele in a Spurs shirt again. And more people stood up for Ndombele. More people continue to stand up for Ndombele after he's been over at Napoli. I find that the Emerson agenda, Dave, I wish it were consistent, is really my kind of whole talking point here. If they want to be that harsh on a player, if they want to make songs about him that bully him, that sort of attack him, that basically just humiliate him, I think. I wish that were the case with Winks then. I wish that were the case with Aurier then. And I wish that were the case with Ndombele. And one of those players, even to prove myself, Dave, Ndombele I even enjoyed. And Ndombele I even had a soft spot for. But there were no songs about Ndombele. And that's where
Yeah,
I think
look,
with Emerson, it's become horrible, if you ask me. It's actually become horrible with how much the agenda is against him. Because I don't think there is a fan club that supports Emerson. There really isn't. Like there was for Winks, there was for Ndombele, there was for Aurier. There were people that backed those guys. There aren't people that back Emerson. And that's what I don't get, because I really feel like there should be more people backing Emerson, if that's what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
Especially with
look,
the abuse he receives.
you can't make fans like a certain individual. You just can't. At the end of the
Mm,
day, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Some people think players are good enough, some people don't. But what I will say is, I do agree with you. I don't think the criticism of Emerson is fair compared to other players in the past. I think certain other individuals, like one you named there, Winks, gets away with it because he was part of a Poch team, even though he barely played or contributed to it. He was part of a Poch team that got us to many semi-finals, many finals, couple of league run-ins, and a Champions League final. So I think that's why someone like him will always
he had
escape it
excuses.
because
People gave him
people want them.
excuses. Yeah.
Yeah, people just want to relive them days and not really consider, well, hang on, he didn't really contribute that much to them days. Um, Look, Aurier is another one. You're spot on. I mean, the guy just done what he wanted at this football club, and again, he got backed, he got excuses made for him, this, that, and the other. But even another one that you've left off the list, Jack, Matt Doherty. I mean, he gets praised for literally not going forward once against Brighton. People are saying, "Oh, geez, Doherty was nearly man of the match." And they're like, and I was the only one that said this at the time, by the way. But if Emerson done that, you'd be ridiculing them. I remember making a point of it. And people were going, "Oh, see, I told you about Matt Doherty." I'm like, "No, you didn't. You told me Matt Doherty wanted to come into this right wing back, or he was going to come in, and he was going to be so much better than Emerson going forward." Because I don't have a problem with Emerson defensively whatsoever. I think he's decent enough defensively. I think he does a job. I think Matt Doherty,
Yeah.
I do have problems with defensively. And it's kind of like,
But you wanted
but
Doherty to be that
everyone's
sensational
on the
recruit.
Doherty hype train. And I'm like, but you all said he was going to go forward and do more than Emerson does. But he didn't. You're praising him because he won a header in the dying minute, got a block in the dying minute. Great. I've seen Emerson do that loads of times. And for 3
Even
games,
last
people are
night.
like, "Oh, Doherty. And I'm like, out of 3 games, he went forward for 45 minutes. At least Emerson tries to do the right thing every single time he enters the pitch. Okay, it may not be in the final third. He can get frustrated, and I'm not naive to know that. And you're not either, Jack, that when he's in the final third, sometimes he's in great positions. Like, oh, come on, man, just a bit of more composure,
Yeah,
a bit
exactly.
better quality.
Yeah.
But at least he keeps getting into them positions and keeps doing it rather than refusing to do it. Now, Matt Doherty's been at this club a lot longer than Emerson, but people still back him. He's got songs made about him. Look, I sang one about him because I enjoyed the song. I really liked the song, the original song, but also Matt Doherty's Irish. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But the nuts and bolts is he's done worse at this club with a longer period than what Emerson has done. And at least Emerson tries to do the right thing rather than constantly pass on the responsibility inside every single time. And
Mm.
look, Emerson doesn't help himself. Stupid things like
Yeah,
that
he
no look
doesn't.
pass when you're chasing a game against Bournemouth and you're like, just do the basics right
Especially
until
after
we
he
get
does
that winner.
two good things before
Save
that.
that for when you're
Yeah.
winning.
Yeah.
Save that for when you're winning. Pick your moments. And I think that's where he lets himself down. But applauding him when he's being taken off, singing songs negatively about him, I don't agree with. I don't agree with, to be honest with you. I think, look, people know me. I will criticize a player when he needs to be criticized. No problem. But one thing I'll never do is really applaud when he's taken off or maybe sing a negative song about him. I think, well, especially when everyone else only gets good songs sung about them and players that maybe never had the quality but people still adore.
Yeah,
Why are
it's
we
just
doing
not.
it to someone like Emerson? Now I get it. He's frustrating. He came into the club in a period where you would say
Downtime.
everything from then on was absolutely scrutinised because of how backwards the club was going. And I think he's sort of fallen victim to that a little bit.
Yeah.
But what I would say is look, for me, and I've stated this a number of times, I think he's the best right wing back we have at the club. I know it's not saying a whole deal,
No, it's not. But
but at the end of the day, if he's the best you've got, just get behind him.
I just don't. I mean, they don't need. He doesn't need to be people's favorite player, and they don't need to like him. I just think it's reached a stage now. Once I heard that song, Dave, I was like, "Well, I have not heard that about other players
It's just the
before."
consistency of criticism. If you're going to
Yeah, that's all it needs
criticize,
to be. If
if
they
you're going
want
to
to be that
criticize
harsh, they're welcome
Emerson,
to be that harsh. But I wanted it to be more consistent because I think there have been players that have disrespected this club. Like, and you mentioned like the quality between him and Doherty. I think, of course, I wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of that, but like again, I could talk about this for an hour, but I can't here. But I even was just mentioning just fairness, Dave. I didn't even want to talk about the quality of the footballer, just fairness. And the one thing I think that really stood out to me as well was when people said they never wanted to see him ever again. And I kind of was like, okay, that's always
I
an
think that
extreme
comes more
comment.
out
And
of
I
anger,
find
though,
that
Jack.
it's just, I think even if it's not really well meant, if it's not really meant in that sort of way, my point being is that fewer people, I think, said that about players that I think probably deserved actually
hundred
that sort
percent,
of comment.
100%. I just think that I think that comes to the Bournemouth incident, and I, I kind of. I think, look, Sanchez is someone that should never put on a jersey again. I
I
think
think that
he's had
comment, though,
four.
about Emerson
I
was
think
said
he's had
before the
4 years.
Bournemouth
I
incident.
think
Yeah.
he's had 4 years to prove that that's the case. But with Emerson, I think, look, the no look pass when you're dying to chase a game and you want, instead of being embarrassed, like that's the difference between being embarrassed and getting a winner.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we ended up getting the winner, but it's just, if he cut out things like that, I don't think he would get the heat that he gets, if you
You're
get what
probably
I
right.
mean. It's just
Yeah,
things
you're
like
probably right.
that in the moment where it's the wrong decision. But I maintain he does a lot more than what Matt Doherty does, but Matt Doherty seems to evade the criticism.
So yeah. Well, King Huddle, let me know what you think of it. Hashtag save Emerson King Huddle. Let me know what you think of that little spiel. Højbjerg is now Sauceberg is the final topic for this one, Davo. Another player, perhaps sort of kind of scrutinized, you could say, well in the past. I wouldn't say nearly as harshly, but um, like definitely harsh at time
No, they
periods
actually
and
committed a
definitely
crime.
very harsh at time periods. Probably, I would say maybe the second most scrutinized player, I think, at this club, maybe for the past 2 or 3 seasons. But Dave, I mean, there's no way he isn't winning back some love here. And I think a lot of the Hojbjerg haters are probably looking a bit silly over this time period because they've called him robotic, they've called him kind of boring, they've called him sideways merchant, etc. The man at one stage, when we looked at the stats on him, had more through balls than Kevin De Bruyne. He has some of the most goals of all. He has the most goals and goal contributions of all our midfielders. I think has some of the most goal contributions of a lot of midfielders in his position in Europe, even like not even just for this team. Dave, he's just been an absolute sensation for us. I mean, he's stepped it up each and every season. I think with under Jose, he was just an absolute warrior for us, just that ball winner, just that guy that just did the dirty work no one else wanted to do in the team at the time. I think the next season he steps it up under Conte. He started to really kind of show maybe that passing range a bit more, start to really show more that technical quality, I think a bit more that maybe was hiding under Jose, or maybe was just getting developed, you could say, under Jose. And now this season, I mean, him and Bentancur have basically been, I would say, the best players this season thus far. And Hojbjerg, I think, is no longer Højbjerg, Dave. He's just Sauceberg. No reason to call him Højbjerg. No reason to mess with the pronunciation or the spelling or anything like that. Just call him Sauceberg.
Yeah, he's got to be called Zinedine Sauceberg, in my opinion. Look, Jack, I think we lost sight of why he was brought in here originally. I mean, he was brought in here because we had so many flair players in midfield, but they wouldn't do the hard part, which is out of possession, hurry
Yeah.
and harass and go and win that ball back, chase people down. They didn't want to do it. So Højbjerg was brought in here to do that job. But then as we realized, it's kind of like, well, hang on, a lot of these guys, they're not even doing it going forward. They're lazy. They're
Yeah.
just shitting on Tottenham. Then all of a sudden, all the flair players are gone, and you're just kind of left with Højbjerg. And
Mm.
it's like just having bread with no butter, Jack. It's a bit boring, but, he's the staple. He does the job. You know what I mean? But then you go into last season, it's kind of like we've accepted that, okay, he's the best of what we've got. A lot of these other idiots have to be moved on. And then it's like, okay, but we do need more in that midfield. What can Højbjerg do? So last season, he done bits going forward, but wasn't consistent enough with what he was doing going forward. So I would say, Jack, it was like bread with butter. It's like,
Mm.
okay, it's not just plain bread, it's bread with butter. It's a bit better. But then this season, it's now bread with butter and jam, Jack. He's added the pizzazz to it. He's added that
Mm.
taste to it. He's getting forward. 4 goals, 4 assists. He's doing things going forward on a lot more consistent basis. Like when you go back to that assist against Leeds last season for Harry Kane, it's like
Oh, gorgeous.
he's got it in his locker, but it's not on a consistent basis. At
Right.
times he was going forward, he was putting some great balls through, and then
Showing
at
a bit of
times just being there
techers. Yeah.
frustrated, like, come on, Højbjerg, better than that. But this season it's consistent, and I think that's now this season he's definitely Sauceberg. I just think we've got to get off his case. In fact, I would actually say what happened to him was harsher than what happened to Emerson. I mean,
Because he's actually a good player at the end of the day. With Emerson, the only reason I'm standing up for Emerson is just because I think he doesn't do nearly as bad as people like to make it out that he
100%, but it was
does.
the same
But
with
with
Højbjerg.
Højbjerg, like Højbjerg is actually genuinely a good player. Like Emerson, I'll admit, isn't
But
actually
the
that
thing with
great of a
Højbjerg,
player.
Jack, he was
Yeah.
being dragged down by another player. Emerson drags himself down at times,
Yeah.
but Højbjerg is being dragged down by
Spot on.
another player. I
Spot
think
on.
that's the biggest difference. In fact, it's a crime. I honestly couldn't.
The
I
abuse
couldn't
he used to
believe
receive. Yeah.
some people were trying to say to me, nah. Look, the problem is Højbjerg. I'm like, okay, Højbjerg's the one pressing. Winks is the one 40 yards behind him, saying, and Højbjerg's looking at him saying, well, Winks, the obvious pass is that guy. Why aren't you pushing up? And it's like, no, but Højbjerg's just jumping out of position and leaving Winks exposed. I'm like, no, Højbjerg's doing what a midfielder is supposed to do. Winks is leaving him exposed. But that's a crime. That should never, ever, ever be allowed to happen at a football club. A guy that is hungry, trying to win the ball back and trying to get possession, versus a guy when we get possession, he's so safe. Even,
Yeah.
it's
He's not like
absolutely
Modric. He's not like playing next to a Modric or
no.
something
It's
that's
just
pinging
kind
it
of like
around
that was
or
more of
anything.
a crime. More of a crime, to be honest with you. It should never happen again at this football club. That was a
Mm.
crime.
I think with Højbjerg this season as well, like he's just shown a lot of elements of his game that I think were like you said, there in flashes, but were probably hard for people to pick up on because ultimately you do have to kind of see it on a consistent basis in order for people to really take hold and kind of take notice, is what I would say. Some of the things though I have seen from Højbjerg this season has been some of his actual just technical quality that people used to say just wasn't there. Like people used to refuse to say that he was a technically good player. I actually think he is a very
I remember
technically
saying
brilliant
at the time,
midfielder.
just quickly on that, Jacko, you can't be a technically bad player and come through the Bayern Munich academy. You can't. It's impossible.
Especially, and also this is the thing, like people say like, oh, like, he didn't really play for Bayern. Like you forget everybody. He was
I did.
recruited to the Bayern Munich Academy. They actually asked for him to go play there. He then left his hometown in Denmark and left with his father, as people have seen in that interview, to go train with Bayern Munich. It's not like he just walked into Bayern Munich one day. Like they asked for Højbjerg. They wanted Højbjerg to go there and train there. And he did train there. And he came up through that academy and actually got games like through that academy, played under Pep Guardiola's team, like was seen as a good academy player through it. Ultimately didn't reach like some world-class level, of course, but has actually shown that he is a technically good player and was
It was his
always a
choice to
good
leave Bayern,
technically good
though.
player.
It
Yeah.
was his choice to leave Bayern to go and get first team minutes. He wanted to leave for first team minutes.
There you go, Davo. There you go. But the thing that I've seen from him this season is just that technical quality that I think people maybe haven't seen or maybe even ignored this season, especially in and around the box. I think is where it's come to light at times. There's been a few times, Dave, where even in that Chelsea game with that finish he made, just sort of like again was just very clever, just somebody that just showed a bit of composure there. You also look at some of the times where I think he did that nice little pullback with one of his assists this season where he just took it around, I think the byline of the box,
Oh,
skilled around the player and pulled a beautiful kind of dink back as well. I even also assisted, right? I think Bentoncourt's goal, if I'm not mistaken, like they assisted each other
yeah.
there. I think Højbjerg is just sorry, excuse me, Dave. Zinedine Sauceberg has shown a lot of technical quality this season that perhaps was always there, but maybe has been just not shown on a consistent basis by himself. And so I am really happy to see sort of Sauceberg be given the praise. And I think a lot of people that really were on his case, really kind of slamming the guy before, they seem a bit quiet right now. And I think it definitely is, I must be honest, a take that I'm glad is starting to kind of just not really be taken seriously anymore. I don't think it's a debate anymore whether Højbjerg is good enough for Spurs or whether he's a top four midfielder or like anything like that. He is proving this season more than ever. He is a top four quality midfielder.
Jack,
And I think absolutely.
he's also proved that saying hard work beats talent every day of the week. Now we've spent money on them flair players in midfield, but because they don't want to work hard, it means they go out there with a kind of attitude where it's like, oh, if it comes off, it comes off. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's no desire and hunger out there on the training ground week, day in, day out to make sure that every time you kick that ball, the weight of your pass is spot on. The accuracy of your pass is spot on. Everything you do is absolutely spot on. Whereas someone like Hojbjerg, who naturally has that hard work and ethic, when you see the glimpses that he could produce last season, someone like him is an absolute banker. He's always going to pull through, and he will get better going forward if he's trying it or if he's asked to try it because he's dedicated to what he does. So he'll be out on the training ground hitting 50, 40-yard balls if he needs to do it till he finds the right connection, until he finds the right way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's going to
Yeah.
keep persistent with it until he gets there. Whereas other players, because they have the ability, they're like, I don't need to do the hard work.
Yeah.
Give me, I'll do it 1 in 10. Easy, easy. You know what I mean? Whereas Højbjerg has to work on it, and hard work beats talent every day of the week. What makes you a great player is having hard work and talent. But look, someone like Højbjerg, just I would say, is when you see a player like that at Tottenham, where okay, you're like, okay, fair enough. People are right to say, okay, what can you start doing going forward now? Fine, no problem. But when you ask that of a player, you've also got to know someone that has a mentality like Højbjerg will always come back with the right answers. So
Yeah.
let's just be aware of that next time when you know someone has the right mentality. Let's just give them time because they'll always find a way. Always.
How much is Sauceberg worth to you, Dave? I think to me, if Real Madrid came in asking, I think you're replacing your captain, you're replacing one of your best midfielders in the team. I think he's worth 60, 70 million to us. I think
I'm gonna
70
go
million.
80.
Actually, I'm going to say 70 million. I think it's worth 70 million to us right now.
I'm
Højbjerg.
going to go 80. You can't replace someone that's first in the training ground every day,
Yeah,
someone
you're
that's
replacing
asked out on the
mentality.
training ground. There's
Yeah,
a lot more to what you see on the football
it's not
pitch that
plug in,
this
plug
guy
out.
offers. Yeah, and he's one of them that when new signings come in, he's a standard setter. He's like, no, we don't do this here. We do it this way, and
Yeah.
you're going to do it this way. So for me, there's added value in that. So I'll move it up to 80.
You almost need like an extra 20 million just to because there's so many players that just don't have that mentality that you're losing. That mentality that you lose with Højbjerg, that captain leadership that you lose is you almost need like an extra 30 million almost just to make sure that you can get that player to replace
Yeah.
that. You're absolutely right. So yeah, 80 million, I'll say it. 80 million, I'll agree with that. So there you are, Real Madrid. That's what their IrishHotspur is going to be asking for. But everybody, let us know what you thought of our comments. Let us know what you thought of our topics. Like I said, it's really actually all the topics I wanted to discuss, more my therapy session here with Dave. So really, you can blame me for any of the topics chosen and any of the things I had to say. But please, please, please do let me know anything that,
You know
you
what though?
probably thought that maybe I said that you agree with, disagree with, anything Dave said you agree with, disagree with, and as well, maybe even any suggestions of topics or anything that you feel like you don't hear out there, maybe in the Spurs sort of YouTube
Mhm.
universe, maybe some things that you feel like aren't given enough light or enough discussion, we'll probably consider as well. But any
Just
final words here,
quickly,
Davo?
yeah, I was going to say, I like you coming with these topics and you airing your opinions because, like, so often, and we try to strike the balance right by getting you as a guest on the pre-match build-up rather than hosting and stuff. But a lot of these debate shows, you're sort of, you can get your opinions out, but not to the extent you want because you're more naturally hosting. So I like these where you could come with your opinions, your views, and then I piggyback off the back of,
Right.
I'll piggyback off the
Appreciate
back of
that.
them. I like it. It gives you your time to shine with your thoughts on it. So it's good.
Appreciate that, Davo. Well, everybody, if you're listening on the podcast universe, I think of Spotify, Amazon, Acast, all that good stuff. Really do appreciate listening on YouTube. If you are listening to it this way, feel free to hit that like button, leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed, feel free to also leave a super thanks if you do enjoy the channel and you want to support the channel. But that'll be all for now, everybody. As always, come on, new
Come on, you
Spurs,
Spurs.
and in Conte
You
we
can't tell me
trust.